Welcome to Football Today, November 6th, Week 9 wrap-up. We got a lot to get to. It was a perfect football slate where you have the Germany game, great matchup, 1 o'clock matchup, 4 o'clock matchup, and Sunday Night Football. Rose is out. We got Dalton Feely. Mikey is the producer. Want to start with Bengals-Bills, right? Sunday Night Football. This is the AFC has created these Bengals versus Bills and Chiefs matchups that they just continue to win. And this was a game where, for me, the Bengals, I was kind of out on them, but Joe Burrow said it what's changed since the bye week? And he's like, I can move, right? And ever since then, he's just looked like the same old Joe Burrow, right? After that calf injury, and he looked basically perfect last night. And every decision was the right one. It was on time. He was getting rid of the ball quick. When he needed to extend, he extended, and was just finding the holes in every single spot of the Bills' defense, right? I put him in that 10 to 20 range throws. He was 9 for 11, hitting corner routes. If it was versus man, he hit Irv Smith. If it was versus zone, he finds that hole shot and gets it in there, perfect timing. It was Joe Burrow has played really well the last few weeks, but it was a reminder to the national audience. I'm right up there with the not Mahomes, but the Allens. That's that 1B tier.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that too, because Burrow's now 5-1 versus Allen and Mahomes in those regular season games, which is kind of crazy to consider. This is what the Bengals did last year too. Burrow had the appendectomy late in the training camp going into the regular season. Bengals started 0-2, very slow. And then once that third week happened, he was healthy again, and they started becoming the Bengals that they were. This season, he's got that calf injury. He's not looking great through the first 3 or 4 weeks. And then since week 5, he's really got it back. I mean, last night, he's 31 of 44, almost 350 yards, no interceptions, only gets sacked once. He looks fantastic. But since week 5, that's been my mark for him. He's looked fantastic. He's number 1 in QB rating since then. He's thrown almost a 76 completion percentage since then, which leads the National Football League at that point. EPA per drive, he's 2nd. EPA per drop back, he's 3rd. And I think this is crazy just from OptaStats on Twitter. Burrow's the 2nd quarterback in NFL history to complete 75% of his passes through a 4-game stretch, throwing 10 touchdowns ever. The only other quarterback to do it, Peyton Manning, 2013, MVP, ring a bell. So he's been playing at that high level, almost an MVP caliber level since week 5. It's been remarkable for that Bengals offense.
Yeah, and if you look at his numbers for the year, it wasn't like the numbers in the beginning were disastrous. It was just the offense looked disastrous, right? And like last year, right, where they like to get in empty and have options to be able to get the ball out quick, but the offensive line struggled and, this stuff wasn't there for them. It just seems like they are an offense, and this is why I feel like they're so deadly in the playoffs, that, we run what we want to run. Sometimes it can look a little murky, but we will figure it out, and we're going to have options on every play. And again, Burrow's becoming I know they didn't have much tight end stats coming into this game, but Burrow is kind of becoming the ultimate, I'm going to give me a tight end, and I will make him work. And I will, Hayden Hurst last year, CJ Uzoma, who was really good for them. And then, yesterday spread it around to, Irv Smith, Drew Sample, and Tanner Hudson.
Yeah.
If you guys want to cover Chase and T. Higgins, and those guys had good game, or Higgins had a really good game too.
Yeah, most yards in a game this year.
That we're gonna hit those corner routes, to our tight ends or slot receiver Tyler Boyd. They are a team that has answers at all 3 receiver spots, and then when you bring in that Burrow's going to get the most out of his tight end, they're a hard team to defend because they're going to get the ball out quick, and you don't know where they're going to go. They're not living through one player, even though they have a Jamar Chase type that you could live through.
Right. And speaking about they're just being unstoppable early on, the past 4 games, we were talking about it. First 2 drives of the last 4 games, so the 8 drives total, they've scored 7 touchdowns and 1 field goal. So they're getting out to early hot leads right off the bat. And since 2021, the Bengals are 21-2 when they score first. So when they get these early leads, they've done a great job, maintaining those victories and winning. For the tight ends, I thought it was very interesting how well Tanner Hudson, Drew Sample, Irv Smith Jr. played, because coming into the game, they had 0 touchdowns. As a unit, they had 0 touchdowns. They scored 2 versus the Buffalo Bills, and you would think with, usually the Bills defense, when they have Matt Milano, Terrell Barnard, who had a concussion, you would think they'd be doing a better job guarding these tight ends. And Burrow said, I don't care. I know you guys have been good versus tight ends in the past. We're gonna scorch you with these guys.
On the flip side of the Bengals, and this leads to some of the Bills' offensive issues, Lou Anarumo is just continually when he's facing great teams, is always going to have the answers for them.
Yeah.
And with, I think it's more of a Buffalo conversation too with the Bills, where it's just like they feel like a team where it's like they just can't help themselves, right? Because you look at these, like it's not some horrible Josh Allen game or anything, but like so they they're using the quick game, right? But then they just like Allen and them get impatient, right? Where you have that interception to Cam Taylor-Britt where he kind of like shows like he's going to stay in the flat, but just stays with that inside leverage. And like, Allen reads that initial leverage and then locks on like, okay, he showed that leverage. I'm going to this. And then obviously he intercepts it. And then something that was like great about the Bills offense earlier in the season when we were saying like maybe the best team in the NFL, they've kind of gotten away from, right? Like if you just look at they handed the ball off to their backs only 8 times in this game. But in the beginning of the season, and they were getting under center to run the ball, and in the past seasons, they would only get under center to run play action, right? But they were actually running the ball, having success on it, and lately they're just kind of running their shotgun dart runs, and just like they just can't help themselves from trying to turn into the total Josh Allen show, even though this wasn't like their typical just trying to force feed Stephon Diggs performance. They just get so impatient, but you look at it, it's like, okay, quick throw, but they just have – then you have the fumble by Kincaid at the end of the game. They just feel like a team that is just always making like those 3 mistakes a game.
This offense is just not cohesive right now. I mean, they score first drive of the game, tie it up 7-7. You think, okay, this is going to be a shootout. We're very excited to watch this Sunday night game, and then it just dissipates. Like, they're just not as good. They were averaging 12.1 yards per play, driving down the field on opening drive. And then after that, 158 yards over their next 8 drives. They just stopped moving the ball. Josh Allen, at one point, he goes from the 6-minute mark in the first quarter to a minute 30, under 2 minutes in the second quarter. Doesn't complete a pass. During that stretch of time, which is just bonkers. Now, in the second half, he plays great. He throws for 138 yards, a touchdown, runs it for 7 times and 42 yards. But they just go away from what they do well. Josh Allen running the ball, passing the ball to Stephon Diggs, Dalton Kincaid. It was just crazy to me. I know he has that shoulder injury, but for Josh Allen to run the ball one time, he's supposed to be that guy in the run game, which I don't know if that's good for the Bills long term and Josh Allen's health. But that's one of the things Josh Allen does really well is run the ball. And he only did it one time at halftime, which was a big part of why the Bills struggled offensively. But I do want to talk about that defense too, because they played decent in the second half versus Cincinnati, but over the last 6 weeks, they've given up 300 yards per game, over 300 yards per game each game, and it hasn't looked pretty. But there's one guy on that Bills defense that's like their big name player, and that's Von Miller, right? We know Von Miller, future Hall of Famer. He's played 5 games this year, 79 total snaps. His stat line for the year, 1 tackle, no sacks, 3 total pressures. To me, we're like, if this Bills defense, is going to click, like Von Miller has to step it up. Like we usually expect Von Miller to have those big plays, and so far this year, coming off injury, has not shown it whatsoever.
Yeah, he's consistently looked like a negative out there, right? And at Von Miller coming off the injury, the hope is to like, okay, he's not going to be the same guy, but make some splash plays in a game, and he just hasn't done that. Now, I think as the season goes along, you will see that happen with him. Like you think of Khalil Mack this season starting out slow, and then all of a sudden, bam, now Mack's not coming off the injury that Miller has. But they have a nice like rotation of ends there too that they like to play.
Yeah.
Like Greg Rousseau's been really good for
Epinesa,
them.
right?
Yeah, like guys who are like good two-way players. So it's hard to take those guys off the field for someone who's not going to be the same two-way player as those guys, but he's also not having the splash, pass rush moves and creating sacks and QB hits and forced fumbles. We're only able to sack Burrow once yesterday. And who got that? It was Jordan Phillips and Leonard Floyd. Yeah, so like and Leonard Floyd has been a good player for them too for the most part. I mean, they truly miss Matt Milano though. Like,
yeah,
Matt Milano was one of those guys who finally was an All-Pro last year, was getting the recognition. And do you think about like that Miami Dolphins game? It's Matt Milano that stopped them, right? Like that's why their defense was able to do all that because Matt Milano made that show run. But without him, they're really struggling. Rasul Douglas, like give him some time to get into that defense, but they were missing Tre'Davious White, getting nothing out of Kyrie Elam. The Bills have some. Right now they're not even in the playoffs right now, which is
5-4. Yeah.
like, and now I would be shocked if they don't make the playoffs. I'd be shocked if they don't win the division, honestly. But right now they are not a playoff team, which is, you're 9 games in for them, and to be at that point, like that's a struggle. Now, I think that's mostly just how good the AFC is this year, but they have their issues.
I will say, Bob, real quick, like looking at their schedule coming up, I'm a little worried about them. I mean, my worry meter, I'm in like that yellow range because, I mean, they have Denver, then the Jets, who they lost to without Aaron Rodgers already once on Monday night, week 1. But then after that, they have Philly, they have Kansas City, they have Dallas in a 3-game stretch. Then they finish off with the Chargers, Patriots, and in Miami. But like with this AFC being so stacked, I'm concerned that they could be the team that misses out with it being such a loaded conference this year.
Speaking of Miami, Dolphins have not beat a winning team this year. They've looked pretty bad offensively versus the Chiefs and the Bills. They look decent offensively versus the Eagles, but they got outscored in that game. Are the Dolphins frauds? Are they simply the team that beats up on the bad teams because of everything McDaniels does, and Tua's great in those games, and then when they play teams with linebackers, and again, the Chiefs are even missing Nick Bolton, but they have Willie Gay and Leo Chanel, and DBs who come up and play in the run, which the Chiefs do really well. They just look nowhere near like the same offense that they are against other teams.
I love Mike McDaniel. I do. I want to be a truther for him. I thought earlier in the year, like, they're going to be like, who's going to stop him? But right now, who's stopping him are these winning teams, these teams with winning records. I think it's just such a huge discrepancy between their wins and their losses. In their 6 wins this year, teams are combined 11-27. That's a .289 winning percentage. They've scored 39 points per game and averaged almost 500 yards per game. Amazing. Like, that is electric offense stuff. That's what the Dolphins looked like on paper to start the year. But then their losses to the Eagles, the Chiefs, and who else did they lose to? The Bills, week 3, right?
Yeah.
Eagles, Chiefs, and Bills, 17 points per game, 309 yards per game. Like, it's just a complete script. Now, the yards per game isn't that bad, but 17 points per game, that's not going to cut in the National Football League, especially when you're playing teams who have combined for a 760 winning percentage this year. I think fraud is a strong term, but maybe in terms of Coach Green, they are who we thought they were. They're not who we thought they were. Like, we thought they'd be a great offense, and they haven't really proven it versus winning teams right now.
Yeah, and Tua looked bad yesterday, right? Like, I thought that this was the worst he'd looked all season. Like, their running game, they didn't get to hand it off a ton, but their running game was really solid. Like, Mostert had 85 yards on 7.1 yards per attempt. That's really good. Overall, over 5.5 yards per carry. It's just those linebackers and the physicality that they play with, they come up and tackle, and their DBs just were able to, like, kind of stomp out anything they wanted to do and close those windows in the middle of the field, and then also cover deep. And like their blitzes were like those spag blitzes where they're dropping Karlaftis and bringing the linebacker. Mm-hmm. They just got physicality and speed. I mean, the Chiefs' defense, right? Well, obviously we're talking about the Dolphins, but the Chiefs' defense is really good this year, but it's not being talked about because it's on the team with Patrick Mahomes.
Exactly. Yep.
And like the Dolphins had 14 points. One of those touchdowns was on a drive that was over, and Chris Jones goes and just lays out an offensive lineman. Not even like a ticky-tack late QB hit, just stupid decision type shit. So really, they were held to 7 points, and then Tua at the end of the game, man. I don't like to go crazy over one throw, but that duck that he threw, was that a miscommunication? I really don't think it was. I really think he just threw a bad ball, because the only thing that could have been where miscommunication was a back shoulder, but it would have been extremely bad placement if it was if that was a miscommunication. To me, that's worse, because at least you're like, hey, Tua's not going to throw duds every week at the end of the games, right? He can throw the ball really well. But what is worrisome is that, like, the receiver ran the right route, had the leverage he wanted. And even if it wasn't like a back shoulder, it's bad placement. So it's bad decision and bad placement. Like, honestly, if you're a Tua defender, you better hope that that's the ball that just slipped, because that was bad decision and bad placement if it wasn't. But I really think he just threw a duck at the end of the game, and just, I mean, that was 6. That was 6 if they complete that ball, or at least gets them down the 1st and goal.
I will say it's so funny that we had this high expectation for the Miami and Kansas City game in Germany, because we think it's going to be firework offensive performance. Miami gets shut out in the first half for the first time since week 2 of 2021. Then the Chiefs, like, low-key get shut out in the second half. They do not put up another point since halftime. Both Tua and Mahomes drove season-low passing yards in this game, too. I will say with Raheem Mostert in the run game, what I thought the Chiefs did a really good job of, we're talking about the secondary being aggressive in the run game and coming up. They did a good job preventing that outside run game, the outside zone, getting outside of the tackles, and they were coming up and making those plays. Usually you'd see those either those end arounds or Raheem Mostert going down the sideline making an explosive run play, but they did a good job coming up. Second half, that kind of switched a little bit where Miami countered. It's like, okay, let's punch it inside a little bit. Let's challenge these linebackers in the run game. That's how Mostert scored his touchdown too in the third quarter. But I'm really curious to see how the Dolphins bounce back. 6-3, 3 losses versus winning teams, 6 wins versus losing teams. Can the offense get right back? Can Tua be good again?
I'm excited to see what McDaniel, because I'm not, like I said, I'm not going to, they're not at the top. They're not as good as we thought, but I'm not going to say they're fraud. I'm excited to see how McDaniel counters for some of the, like they put some, like the way the Chargers beat them last year, right? With their long motion and just, so this year they come out with, lining up Tyreek at wingback and just keeping everything condensed and then motioning out of that. How will he counter now? And I think a big part of that is the inside runs, because they've showed where they do so much well with misdirection and getting out on the edges and having all 10 blocking for the runner, or all 9 without the QB. But when they've played teams that have good linebacker play like the Bills and then the Chiefs now, and DBs who come up on the run fit, like Taron Johnson for the Bills, their nickel corner, plays like a linebacker, that they're not able to get the most out of that. So do they counter with trying to get to some more inside runs, maybe some more traditional stuff with Tyreek and Waddle, spread, maybe get out of empty and spreading stuff out. So I think that they can adjust, but they also are not as good as we thought they are.
I will say real quick, Bobby, the only reason why I'm not worried about them, I'm going to go bold here. I think they're going to win the AFC East. And here's my logic why. Looking at their upcoming schedule, it's much more favorable compared to the Buffalo Bills. Next 4 weeks, they got the Las Vegas Raiders, New York Jets, Washington Commanders, Tennessee Titans. If they don't go 4-0 that stretch, they could be very well 10-3.
Bills the last week. I might be changing my take of the Bills winning the division now.
It would be interesting. I mean, if that's a meaningful game where the Bills are playing or like down 1 game going into Miami, win and they get the division. I know they have Dallas and Baltimore towards the end too, Miami, but I still feel pretty good about them.
So I see them being at worst 10-4 going into the last 3 games of Cowboys, Baltimore, Buffalo. If they win one of those 3, they probably win the division. So I agree with you. I do agree with you that they win the division then. On the flip side with the Chiefs, not their best. Vic Fangio was ready for them to shut down Travis Kelce. That's not going to happen every week. But where it is an issue with this Chiefs team is that receiver can hold them back. Now, I still think they are just as much as a Super Bowl contender as everybody, because when you have that defense playing like it is, and we've seen them perform well in the playoffs, and Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce on offense, they are just as much a threat as everyone else. But they are getting no contribution from their wide receiver room. And it's not even just no contribution. It's like they weren't like this game, but in other games, they are just actively creating negative plays for them, whether it's drops turn into interceptions, fumbles. They're just actively creating negative plays, and they're just begging for someone to step up into that role. And their leading receiver yesterday was Noah Gray. Noah Gray, like who is there? Let me look it up. Who's their the leading receiver on the season?
At receiver, right?
Yeah, but outside of Travis Kelce, obviously Kelce's there. Is it?
I'm gonna.
It's Rashee Rice,
yeah,
right? Whereas Rashee Rice has these splash plays, but he's got a ways to go,
and he's got a lot of drops too. I think he's had a big drop problem to start his career.
Right. So, Rashee Rice I'm surprised that I know they went after Mecole Hardman, but I thought that they would be a team that would be in on Jeudy, because Jeudy is not. He's not what we wanted him to be, but he is a good receiver in the NFL. And he's a 2 in the NFL, but I feel like he would have looked like a 1 with the Chiefs, and I'm just surprised that they didn't go after someone outside of Mecole Hardman, because right now they're getting negative contribution from their receiving, their receiver room.
I completely agree with you. Mecole Hardman is not a needle changer whatsoever. Jeudy could be a little bit. We've seen him, especially versus Kansas City last year. He had a couple of good games versus him this year, not as much. But you're so right about this Kansas City Chiefs receiving room. They've been absolutely, I don't want to say atrocious, but they've really let down Patrick Mahomes.
They might be the worst wide receiver room in the NFL.
Yeah, and it's that's not hyperbole. That's how bad this unit is. If you take away, if we're just looking at wide receivers, not pass catchers, wide receivers, this could be the worst wide receiver room in football. when we're looking at Chiefs, they're offensive skill players, right? The last player to not name Travis Kelce to have a 100-yard game as a receiver, Jerick McKinnon in 2022, Week 14. Last time a Chiefs receiver had a 100-yard game, Week 7, 2022 versus San Francisco. That's Juju Smith-Schuster's not on the team anymore, and MVS. Both of them had 100 yards. Since Tyreek Hill has left the Chiefs, they've had 3 100-yard games in the regular season since 2022. So 26 regular season games, 3 occurrences where they've had a receiver hit 100 yards. That's asinine. We have Patrick Mahomes at quarterback, right? We're talking about the greatest quarterback in the National Football League, and your receivers have not put up 100 yards per game. 100 yards in a game. It's absolutely asinine. Mahomes this year, this is from PFF George, on 20-yard passes down the field, he's thrown 7 interceptions this year. In 2021 and 2022, he threw 6 combined.
And where Mahomes needs to adjust, and this wasn't this game, but just season long with them, he's had his sometimes interceptions are a stat that doesn't tell the story of a quarterback.
Sure.
This year they have with Mahomes. Like, they've been really bad, like, kind of just fuck it throw interceptions. And unless you're throwing it to Kelce, like, you don't want to be doing those. Like, so that is where he needs to have a little patience. Like, you think of that Denver game where it's like, these are just bad, just horrible decisions. Not the first Denver game, the one that they won on Thursday night.
Right.
Just bad interceptions. And then obviously some that got tipped up by Tony in Week 1 and stuff. But I feel like he'll figure that out. I think they're going to figure out a way to get Kelce. Kelce's not going to be held to 3 catches for 14 yards. But as a team that has a Super Bowl standard, like, they do have real issues offensively with that receiver room.
And if it wasn't for that defense, second in points per game, third in passing yards per attempt, fourth in total yards per game. If it wasn't for that Spagnuolo defense right now, the Chiefs would not be in the position that they are.
Yeah. Let's do Eagles-Cowboys. This is a game the Eagles won, but I come away from this like feeling a lot better about the Cowboys than I did coming into this. Eagles, obviously, like Jalen Hurts looked good. The throw to Devontae Smith was amazing. Like, Hassan Reddick probably, who hasn't done what he did last year, had a really good game versus Terrence Steele. And the Cowboys, despite being like the CeeDee Lamb show or bust, really, I thought, had their best game offensively considering the opponent, right? Like, you had CeeDee Lamb do all the shit that he does, right? He had, 180 yards or something on the game?
Yeah, 191.
Jake Ferguson, who has been their number 2 receiver, coming into this game, had his best game. And I love Jake Ferguson as a blocker coming out of Wisconsin. And I was like, hey, this guy can win on routes, even though he doesn't have the athleticism that flashes and gets you picked on day 2. He was routing up. Their linebackers had a return route versus Kevin Byard. Like, they were the Cowboys were so good on 3rd and 4th down, right? Like, there was even times where they were in 3rd and 15s, and they knew, hey, let's get this to 4th and manageable, and then they did, and they were 3 for 5 on 4th. This is a game where I know the Eagles won, and the Eagles are still really good, probably the favorite in the NFC to most people, but this is a game where the Cowboys, this could have been a national, like, here goes the Cowboys, can't beat the good teams. They didn't beat them, but you feel better about them, like Dak using his legs. I thought the Cowboys looked well, and obviously the Eagles did too. They ran their offense essentially perfectly. Defensively, they were able to make enough plays at the end of the game, despite trying to have giving them yellow flags all up and down the field.
I just think it's so funny. This Dallas team has been. This is from Fox, like, all in or all out. They either win blowout games or they lose blowout games. This year, they had 1 lead change going into last night, which is unbelievable. Through 7 games, 1 lead change. I'm most concerned about the run game for the Dallas Cowboys, which is something that, like, usually we don't say when we talk about that Dallas Cowboys offense. Tony Pollard hasn't run for over 55 yards in 5 straight games. And
they've been very inefficient. It's not even just total yards.
Yeah, like yards per attempt, absolutely.
They have offensive line issues up front. So, again, I'm not putting the Cowboys on, like, with the Eagles and 49ers right now, but this is the type of games you need to see from Dak. Right, we're again making plays with his legs, but the Eagles. I mean, what are they? They're 7-1, 8-1 now.
8-1, I believe.
Yeah, 8-1, and again, they've put together such a high standard that this just seems kind of normal for them. Like Jalen Hurts, like that throw to Devontae Smith.
Oh,
I mean, that's
smooth.
Like, there's no better ball placement in a throw than that. Right down the field, outside shoulder, just perfect in the bucket. I thought they did some really good stuff. And just on the Cowboys side, it's just that last drive, you were talking about it before the show, just the ultimate penalty fest.
56 yards from Eagles penalties, and they still couldn't score.
Yeah, and then the Cowboys also had here's my thing with the Cowboys. I thought Brandon Cooks was the most underrated move of the offseason. And he's done nothing for them, right? Where they are, like you said, Jake Ferguson's their number 2 receiver. Tolbert put up some good numbers for them yesterday, but he's not somebody you consistently rely on. I thought Cooks was going to be huge for him. He only has 17 catches on the year, and he doesn't have even one really good game with Dallas. You thought he at least at that. I'm very surprised. I thought that he was going to really be a key piece for Dak and having that second receiver, but instead it still has been the CeeDee Lamb show for that Dallas. It's you mentioned their running game's not very good. Jake Ferguson, I love him, but he's their number 2 receiver. Their whole offense is CeeDee Lamb.
It's CeeDee Lamb or bust. It's so funny. Brandon Cooks hasn't had a 50-yard receiving game this year, which is unbelievable for Cooks being a guy who's had 1,000 yards in basically almost every year he's played. CeeDee Lamb, I think it's so cool when I see stats like that. 11 catches for 191 yards. He almost wills their way to win that game.
Every time they play the Eagles, it's just CeeDee Lamb. They cannot cover the middle of the field for CeeDee Lamb, and then obviously they gave up stuff in the middle to them. So if you have worries about the Eagles, it is on the defensive side. They can't cover the middle of the field. Their run defense has gotten a lot better this year, but their pass defense has kind of suffered.
Absolutely. That's my concern. Offense, they still find ways to win game. Hurts is now 10-0 versus teams with a winning record since 2022. So they find ways to win games even when they don't look like the sharpest since last year.
Well, last year it's impossible. Last year they played perfect ball offensively.
High standard, yeah.
And their defense, they had the most sacks in the NFL, won almost the record. When you watch the Eagles last year on offense, it was perfect football.
Yeah.
Every single down, Jalen Hurts is making the right decision. So they're not as good as last year, but they have to be top 5 in scoring this year in efficiency.
In terms of what? I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
They're just their overall offense. It just doesn't look like the exact standard that they set last year. But you got AJ Brown involved, Devontae Smith, Goddard. I don't know how much time he's going to miss, but
roughly 4 weeks, fractured wrist. That's the estimate. We'll see the official news.
So they should be able to survive. I know they have a tough schedule. They should be able to survive that. Football season is in full swing, and we've teamed up with DraftKings Sportsbook to get you closer to the action, not to the sun, to the action. DraftKings, an official partner of the NFL, has an offer you don't want to miss. All customers can get a no-sweat bet. So, again, not close to the sun. You're not sweating. On any same-game parlay or same-game parlay X, and all new customers who bet $5 will get $200 in bonus bets instantly. So download the DraftKings app now and use promo code FOOTBALLTODAY. Fan of your alma mater or your hometown team? Combine multiple bets together for a shot at an even bigger payout. If you've already signed up for DraftKings like me, you can get a no-sweat bet on any same-game parlay or same-game parlay X bet if your bet does not hit. Max wagering limits apply. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. New customers use promo code FOOTBALLTODAY. Bet just $5 on any wager and get $200 in bonus bets instantly. That's promo code FOOTBALLTODAY only at DraftKings Sportsbook. You'll be glad you did. Seahawks, Ravens. The Ravens are now kicking the shit out of good teams with the Lions a couple weeks ago and now the Seahawks. And the way they won is, they ran for 300 yards. 41 carries for 300 yards against Again, this isn't like a Dolphins versus the Broncos type game. The Seahawks had one of the best run defenses in the NFL. They add Leonard Williams this week, who's one of the best two-way defensive tackles. You have Jaron Reed, who's been an awesome nose tackle for him. You have the linebackers. You have a team that we talk about, the DBs and stuff being involved against the Dolphins. Their DBs fit great in the run game, and the Ravens just ran it down their throat all game long. And when they did throw the ball, everything worked for them.
It's crazy. The Ravens had 4 guys rush the entire Seattle offense. They had Gus Edwards get 52 yards. Lamar Jackson had 60 himself. Keaton Mitchell, first time he ever had an NFL carry, rushed for 138 yards. Justice Hill has 40 yards. They looked offensively, just controlled the game. 40 minutes of time of possession. They were in control of this game. Odell, your boy, scores his first touchdown on his 31st birthday. That's pretty impressive.
Well, to have that type of offensive game when your best receiver, Zay Flowers, had 1 catch for 11 yards is just if Odell can get to a place where you feel good about him as a number 2, right? Because before this, you really haven't seen that. I feel like that's the key for them. And I wasn't as high on the Ravens. Honestly, that game against the Steelers just soured me because there's so many mistakes. I'm like, this is just a team that's going to have self-inflicted wounds. But they've just been kicking the shit out of teams, and then their defense has been consistently great all year. And they make plays. They get their guys in the right spot. Geno Stone, I'm really like him, the way they use him as a third safety just to kind of like roam around and make plays and like disguise. Basically, they'll use him to like, okay, we're going to disguise this coverage, and you're going to come flying over the other field. Like the interception they had on Burrow at the beginning of the year was like just beautiful like safety play and beautiful. Mike McDonald just is really getting the most out of every guy in that defense and throwing tendency changers every week. Like he's going to get a head coaching job. So this Ravens team, like that defense is going to be great. Lamar is one of the best in the NFL. If they can get that running game going, right, and they pull guys, like they have a diverse run game that works. If you can get Odell to be a confidently like a good number 2 receiver and Zay Flowers to not have the drop issues, and then you have Mark Andrews, like they have answers for everything.
I'm very impressed with this Baltimore defense. I wasn't expecting them to be the number 1 defense right now in football. Like they're first in total points per game allowed, first in red zone touchdown percentage allowed, first in passing yards per attempt, second in yards per game allowed. They've just been so electric. They've held opponents to 9 points or fewer 4 times this year already. This defense has been absolutely electric. Like you said, Geno Stone records his NFL-leading 6th interception. Justin Matabuke has been a big contributor on that defensive line. He's recorded half a sack in 6 straight games, which is a franchise record. I'm very curious to see what they do in the next 2 weeks because they've beaten the Lions 3 weeks ago. They beat the Seahawks this week. 2 great tests. The next 2 tests, Cleveland Browns, Cincinnati Bengals, and AFC North, where all 4 teams are currently in the playoff picture. Now you're facing your guys within the division. Can you continue this dominance, both the running game of the offense, the passing game of the offense, and that defense too?
That Browns game next week, honestly, I haven't looked at the schedule, but that is the game I'm paying attention to the most to see future implications because that Browns defense obviously shutting out. Any time a shutout's impressive, but the standard is so high that shutting out the Cardinals doesn't move me. But after that 28-3 where their offense created points for the Ravens, I'm very excited to see those 2 teams face a second time, how they'll scheme up for each other. I think that is like a very I feel like that's a playoff implications type game because I'm very high on the Browns. I think if their quarterback play can just be average, they can be deadly. And then the Ravens, like, go up and play that great defense again. If you have answers for that defense, then you are. I mean, they already are Super Bowl contenders, but you become like Super Bowl favorites in the AFC with all the flaws as the other, like all the other AFC teams. They have flaws. The Chiefs, their receiver room, the Bills, their impatience on offense, the Dolphins, like we talked about. If they can not have the self-inflicted wounds and have answers versus the Browns defense, you look at them and it's like this is the team that is the least flawed in the AFC.
Let me just ask this before we potentially shift. AFC North, Ravens are 7-2, Pittsburgh's 5-3, Cleveland's 5-3, Cincinnati's 5-3. How many of these teams in the AFC North make the playoffs? And if there's a team or teams that don't make it, who are they?
I think the Steelers are the one team that doesn't make it, right? You can't be that bad offensively, consistent. And I love the Browns. I think the Browns they just got to get in. But I feel like they will get in.
Okay.
The Ravens' schedule is really tough, man. So, but they will be in, obviously, and then the Bengals, it'd be shocked if they don't get in. So I do think you get 3 teams out of the AFC North. I know 4 in right now, and then the Bills and Dolphins will figure out that other wild card spot and division winner. No one from the South. The West, no one. Maybe the Chargers can make some noise, but I don't see them being consistent enough to compete to fight for that. So I think the Steelers, despite the fact that they will probably finish above 500, will be the odd team out in the division.
I got you. I'm kind of with you. For me, it's the Steelers and Browns. The Browns defense is better. The Steelers defense is good. They're above average group. It's just which offense can figure it out between the Cleveland Browns and Pittsburgh Steelers. Like Cleveland Browns losing Nick Chubb. Like now, look at the implications that's had. I think the Bengals are hot again. They're back. Offense is back. Defense is still playing really good. So I think I'm in agreement with 3 teams making it. I don't know which one of between the Cleveland Browns and Pittsburgh Steelers miss. If I'm going to take a shot in the dark, I'm going to go with you and say Cleveland because how good. They're like basically the second best defense in football right now statistically. So I'll ride with you between Baltimore, Cleveland, and Cincinnati making it.
Yeah, I feel like the Browns need to have like a like on offense. Like, hey, we just got to be an offense that doesn't mess this up for the defense.
Right.
And you look at what Watson did yesterday. That's kind of what that was. Like 19 to 30, nothing special, but 2 touchdowns, 7 yards per throw. And then can they get enough running? Can they get enough consistency in the run game out of Ford and Hunt? And I think they'll get in. All right, that's all we got. We're only going to do 4 topics today. Thank you for joining me.
Of course. Thanks for having me. This was awesome, man.
Heading back to Florida tonight. Mikey,
Nice.
appreciate you producing. We will see you on Friday back with Chris Rose, and that is Football Today.